All right, so we're live here, guys. I appreciate everybody that's jumped on, especially considering the weather that's out there. I know a number of you guys have kids home from school, as do I. That is why I'm here in the office. We are all not as lucky as Pedro here, who's hovering around in the background, who can just come to the office anytime he well pleases. So I appreciate everybody joining in today. I know life is chaotic and crazy, and I say it a lot, but this is just another sort of example. Everybody that's here is taking time out of their day to learn and grow and collaborate and either help other people or just learn themselves. And so you should applaud yourself for participating like this. The more that you can sort of, dive into all of the education that's out there, whether it's from me or somebody else, the better that you guys are going to be to help and serve your clients and your family and your friends and all that kind of stuff. So, I wanted to start, when I was thinking about what we should talk about today, and what might be valuable for a lot of the folks that I'm working with. I started having conversations recently with Ashley and Kristen and Pedro and even Lorraine. Her and I had a conversation. Dan, you and I had a conversation about the pre-qualification process and what process you take to have conversations either before you go out or once you go out to the property. Like, what are the questions we're asking and why are we asking them? And I think it's important enough right now for us to really dive into that and figure out a really good plan for everybody so that you can be as effective as possible, because in no uncertain terms over the next couple of months, we're going to come in contact arguably with 50 to 60% of the buyers and sellers that we're going to work with or for the rest of the year. So I'm going to switch my screen a little bit, but I'm curious, especially for those who have your cameras on, but who of us right now actually has a pre-qualification that they use, especially when they talk to buyers and sellers? Is there a common set of questions? Like, do you have a written out set of questions when it comes to, what you ask sellers and buyers? By a show of hands, I know, Lorraine, you're working on one. Dan, you have one. Don, what's your process like?
Sorry, I was muted. I have a script that I learned when I was at KW that is internalized and been modified for my own purpose, but it's memorized at this point.
Yeah. And I think that's sort of the same thing that I've done over the years is I've determined, I've used scripted sort of canned presentations in the past. And I've sort of modified them over time, but internalized them as well. And I think this is always a good exercise for me, because as I was talking with, all of these folks about the pre-qualification questions and like why they ask them, it made me really go back and determine sort of what is important and whether I was still asking all of the right questions or whether I was, sort of just if I lost track of some of the stuff that was important. And to be honest with you, preparing for this, that's sort of what I found out. I found out that, there was a couple of things that I had been ingrained in understanding and learning and asking, but that have slipped away over the years because I haven't revisited, the list of questions that I'm asking. So I think this is good for everybody, regardless of how long you've been in the business. But I wanted to, one of the first questions that I asked myself when I was looking into this is like, just a simple question of like, why are we pre-qualifying? So for those of you who can talk or in a position to talk, like what in your opinion, what is the main purpose of why we're pre-qualifying our clients?
Motivation.
Absolutely. And what about the motivation is important?
You want to make sure that they already decided that they really want to move. Then you don't want to waste your time.
Yeah. So if you don't determine motivation, Lorraine, in your opinion, what does it prevent you from doing? Like if you just go in blind, you have no idea what their motivation is.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think that I'm going to waste my time. I don't want to work with someone that is not truly motivated.
Yeah. And I think that that's important when you evaluate how much time you're spending. That is one of the biggest things, is to determine whether or not, it's worth your time, but also keep in mind, like, if you are really out there trying to provide value to your clients, one of the things you don't want to do is you don't want to waste their time either. Right? Because if you go out and you don't pre-qualify and then you find out that this is just not the right property, you've actually not only wasted yours, but you've wasted their time as well. And I think one of the things about motivation, and we'll get into this a little bit more, but one of the things about motivation is that if you determine ultimately what is really important for the client, then at that point you can really figure out how you can help them. Without determining what is important to them, is pricing more important? Is, the speed at which you move? Is the ease of it? Like, what is really driving the motivation? And sometimes as a client, the client can start to get disconnected from the justification and the reasoning. They can sort of forget it in the chaos of all the stuff that is going on. And so sometimes it's incumbent upon us as real estate agents for us to sit back and remind them about their motivation. If you can understand their motivation and then remind them about it, it sometimes allows them to get over the hurdle of some of the stuff that they're looking to accomplish. Whereas if they're just frantic and they've got so many things that they're thinking about and they've got, all this stuff, sometimes they forget about the motivation and they'll make decisions just based on sort of like what they would normally do, drag their feet or not push through or not do it in this timeline because they're scared or anxious or just overwhelmed. And so if you can divert people back to their motivation as to why they should do something, that's really, really, really powerful. So I think that that's good. One of the other things that I would suggest that you write down, just from a mindset point of view, because I don't know if anybody else has experienced this, but over the years, there's certainly been a lot of occurrences where like, for one reason or another, I just don't pre-qualify properly. I just I'm in a rush, or it's a really big listing, or the client is just not really interested in me asking a bunch of questions and I don't push back. But realistically, what is true is that pre-qualifying, especially before we go out, it illustrates our professionalism, right? So take into consideration two different agents, right? You're a seller and you're having conversations with two different agents, and one of the agents you connect with, and that agent goes, "Oh yeah, I would love to come out to your house. I'm so excited. What time should we meet? Thursday, 10 o'clock. Great. I'll look forward to seeing you then." And then you get on the phone. Hold on. Then you get on the phone with somebody else, right? You get on the phone with another agent, and that agent starts off and he says, "Lorraine, so I have a number of different questions I'd like to ask you right now. And my intention behind asking them is so that I can be as prepared as possible, not to waste any of your time or mine, and make sure that I am making suggestions based on what you want to accomplish and really catering my advice and guidance to your needs. Does that make sense?" And then spending 10 or 15 minutes going through that list of questions, ultimately to determine motivation, determine how you're going to be able to help them. And then when you go out to the house, that first agent comes out to the house and, "Oh my God," and they spend 45 minutes walking through the house, having a conversation that they should have had a while ago. And then they got to go back to their office to determine the price of the house. And then they've got to set up another time for you to come in. I don't know. To me, I'd rather somebody come prepared versus now that pre-qualified agent drops off a packet of information before the appointment, the CMA, the listing presentation, sends it to them either electronically or drops off a paper copy. And then they sit down and they have clear, identifiable sort of like timeline of the appointment and exactly what, these are all catered to exactly what you need based on your motivation. Answers your questions that you have. Think about the difference between those two agents and the confidence that the seller or buyer will have with you after you present like that, especially if they're interviewing somebody else who doesn't do their job. So it's like, it is, yes, we don't want to waste our time. We don't want to waste the seller's time. You know, we want to, you know, determine how serious they are. But also, we want from the start, guys, from the start, at every point in the process, we want to illustrate that we are the professional. Now, here's what's interesting. What's interesting about real estate agents, especially newer ones, or folks that have been in the business, but they don't like go out and generate business from people or clients that they perhaps don't know, is that we get away with not being professionals for a very long time, depending on how quickly you ramp up your business. So think about it. You get into the business. Who are you doing business with mostly? You're doing business with friends and you're doing business with family. Your sister calls you to list her house and you go, okay, go over there, and you just kind of sign up paperwork and you show her a couple of comps, and then you put the property on the market. And then your neighbor sells, but you've got a great relationship. So you go over and you have a glass of wine or a cup of coffee with them, and you sign the paperwork and you show them a couple of comps, and they say, well, I want to list my house for 800,000, and you put it on the market at 800,000. And then you get into this routine of, well, I don't need a pre-qualification because I just walk in. I've got like 100%, you know, listing presentation to contract signed, which is great until you realize that you've only gone out on 2. So 100% of 2 is 2. It's still below what you need to be doing. But that's what we get into the habit of. And I guess I was blessed at the beginning of my career, because when I started real estate here in Mansfield, I didn't have any friends or family. So everybody I interviewed with, every single person was like a stranger. So I couldn't rely on the relationship that I had with them in order for me to get the listing. And sometimes if you get into that habit and that routine of just going out on the appointment because you know them and it's easy, sometimes what that does is ultimately it makes you afraid to interview with people that don't know you. Right? It's so intimidating. It's like, well, you know, if you end up getting introduced to somebody that you don't know and they're like, yeah, I'm going to interview 3, 4, 5 agents. And you're like, shit, now what do I do? Right. Like it's easy if it's somebody you know and you don't have to compete. It's a completely different thing if you're going against 3 or 4 people. Now imagine you go up against somebody who's like, you know, a top producer. Professionalism, illustrating that makes a difference. And it starts, guys, it starts right with the first conversation. You hear this stuff all the time. Like you can't make a first impression twice or something like that. It is true. Like what I've done over the years is I've looked at every single step in the process. What can we do on initial conversation to illustrate? And part of it, yes, is sort of part of it is in an effort to secure the business and, you know, help these people. But part of it is if you illustrate that, the level of confidence that the client has in you, which ultimately will allow them to receive the information that you're talking to them about in a much more open and honest way, that actually ultimately helps the client a lot. If you give them the confidence to know that you know what you're doing, then it eliminates them guessing, right? Because this is what sellers do. Sellers see me walk in the door. If they don't have a whole lot of confidence, they might question the price that I say. But if they're questioning the price and they're questioning whether I know what the hell I'm doing, now they've got to sort of get themselves over the hump on, you know, does Ben actually know what he's doing? And is that pricing strategy correct? What we're trying to do is eliminate that first question that they have. Is Ben qualified enough? Does he know what he's doing? give them the confidence, make them understand that like that right now, from the beginning until your home is sold, I'm going to do everything that I can to help you with this process. I'm going to give you the confidence to know that you can trust the decisions or the advice that I'm giving you. You don't need to listen to every bit of advice that I give you, but you can trust that you know that it's authentic and it's truthful. And so part of this, guys, is understanding just it's a mindset. So with regards to pre-qual, we're going to talk about two main ones today, the seller pre-qualification and obviously the buyer pre-qualification. The buyer pre-qual can be two parts. It can be clients that you're looking to work with, go out and help buy or sell a home. But for those listing agents that are on this call, it's also a pre-qualification for going forward, unrepresented buyers, to make sure that you're not just wasting time. Because everybody who's listed property here knows that you get calls from people that just say, hey, my name is Ben. I'd like to come out and see 123 Main Street. And what do most agents do? Oh, okay. When do you want to, when do you want to get out? Oh, Friday at 8:30 p.m. Sure. I'll kick the sellers out of their house. I'll meet you right there. My daughter has dance recital, but I'll skip it because I got to show you this house. And then they end up not being pre-qualified. And then they call their agent after they've seen the home. And then they try to write up the offer with the agent. So there's a lot of things that we can do. So sellers, buyers, but also there's sort of, I don't know that it's a pre-qualification process, but there's also a lot of questions that we can ask agents prior to working with them throughout a transaction to make sure that they understand what their job is and that they're knowledgeable enough to get us from start to finish line. Because we've all been part of a sale where the real estate agent on the other side, on the buy side, makes it more difficult. And if you do have multiple offers, I'm not suggesting that that is going to be the ultimate criteria by which your clients are going to make a decision. But by asking a number of specific questions with regards to that agent, you can determine how qualified they are to help their client get from start to finish line. And if you have concerns about it, not that you make the decisions, but you can sort of relay those concerns to the seller so that they understand what their options are and what they're getting involved in. Does that make sense? Good. So the first thing that we're going to do when we start a pre-qual is we're going to set the intentions and allow the seller to understand why we're asking the questions that we're asking. It's an important part of the process because if you just go into questions, sometimes the seller doesn't understand what's going on. So if you tell them, they'll have a better sense of, if you tell them exactly what you're doing, then they understand the process. So Don, I've got you down Thursday here at 5 o'clock. I'm super excited about meeting you tomorrow at 5. Now, before I come out, Don, in an effort to be as prepared as possible and not waste any of your time, I'd like to ask you a few questions. Do you have time for those right now, or should I schedule a time with you this afternoon to go through those?
No, it's good.
Right. And even if, the reason that I ask is because I want to give them an option. I want them to understand that this is going to take a couple of minutes, right? 5 or 10 minutes. And sometimes they'll ask, they'll be like, well, how many questions? And I'll be like, honestly, we should be 5-10 minutes tops. And if we run over that, I can always call you back. But you want them to understand that they have an option, right? You don't have to do things on my timeline. Hey, if it's better for you this afternoon, would 2 o'clock or 4 o'clock work better? Give them a decision to make. Not what time works best for you. No. Does 2 o'clock or 4 o'clock work better? 2 o'clock works better. Great. Should I plan to call you on your cell phone Or is there another line that works better? Illustrating what we're doing. Again, taking command of the conversation and making sure that they understand that you're going to ask a series of questions. It's going to take a couple of minutes, but you're open to having that conversation later today.
Mhm. Good.
Don, is that part of your sort of internalized script?
Yes. There's a couple of things that I thought of when you were saying that. One is by offering alternative times, it doesn't seem like you're desperate.
Yep.
And also by providing specific times, that says that you're not available unconditionally as well.
Right.
So they understand that you are busy and you do have specific times available for them, but they get to choose.
Yeah, the whole desperation thing, right? We've seen it with salespeople time and time again, right? It's like, I'm available anytime, nights, weekends, I don't care when. Just can I please come over? Can I please get this business? I promise I'll do a really good job. Right? People who are expected to pay 10, 15, 25, $40,000 for your services, they don't want desperation. They can smell it. They can feel it. They can sense it.
Right.
Right? There's a sense of confidence. But the only way that you get that confidence is by understanding why you're doing what you're doing, practicing it, and having something very detailed about the list of questions that you go through. If you leave this call and you don't do anything else, but the next time you pick up the script that I'm going to send out after this meeting, you pick up the script after the meeting, and then in a month you try to pre-qualify. I don't care if you try to follow the script. You're going to be stumbling over it. Right now, but before I come out, there's questions I need to ask. Are you okay with that? Right? Versus you practice it, you sit down. Now, before I come out, there's a number of questions that I want to ask. And my intention in asking those is to be prepared for our time so that I don't waste any of yours. Right? Confidence. It's all part of it. It's illustrating that you're a professional from the jump.
Mm-hmm.
What you also want to understand sort of at the beginning of this, you set the expectations. You want to understand the full dynamic of what you're working with. Typically, when you're having a conversation, outside of my 70-year-old clients who will put me on speakerphone on their home telephone number, typically you're talking to, Don's laughing. You know how it goes. I call my parents, you're on speaker. It's a thing. You got to talk to two of them at the same time. That's great. If they're both sitting right there, have them hop on the phone. But generally speaking, are you talking to one person or are you talking to two? It's one. Generally speaking, you're talking to one person. And if you're talking to one person, that's great, right? But you need to understand like the totality of the picture. So set expectations. There's a number of questions that I need to ask you. One of the first ones that you want to ultimately understand is whether or not that is the only person that's making a decision or if there's other parties that are involved. So Ashley, we've had the great opportunity to sort of know each other through CrossFit a little bit. And, I know that describe the circumstances, how you guys know each other, but are there any other decision makers that are going to be involved in the decision on who to choose for the agent and then ultimately what to do with the property when it goes on the market?
Of course, my husband.
Of course, your husband. Sometimes it's a dad, sometimes it's a sister, sometimes it's
You're good now.
back now. All right. So if there's a husband, what that's going to do, okay, great. And your husband's first name is, and then you get the name of the person so you can use it. And the reason that you want to do that is twofold. Number one, you want to confirm later on. You want to confirm that that person is going to be available for the appointment, because you don't want to go out to a house where there's two decision makers, sit down, present to one of the decision makers, do a great presentation, have them fully on board, and then them go, well, I'll talk to my husband and I'll relay all of the wonderful things that you've said. Because in sitting down for the last half hour, I know how to relay real estate information in a way that is concise and digestible, and I can do that for my husband, right? And then they sit down and they're like, well, he's selling us 750 and we thought 800. Let's not go with him. We'll go with somebody else. So you want to understand who you're working with. And then throughout the pre-qualification questions, you can start to determine, you ask motivational questions, which is the next one. Right? So Dan, why have you decided to make the move? Where are you planning on going?
Going down south, retiring,
Yeah. And what's important about the move?
getting out of this New England weather.
Yeah, I certainly can't blame you, especially on days like today. You know, ideally, Dan, in terms of what you're looking to accomplish, because that's what's most important. In terms of what you're looking to accomplish, because that is what's most important. Ideally, how soon do you want to be down there?
I'd like to be down there by the summer.
Summer. And is summer sometime in like June, July, August? Is there a particular month you'd look at as ideal?
No particular month, anywhere in that range works.
So let's say the middle of July, right? And if we were to backdate that with a 45 to 60 day closing, and in order to market the property, we'd certainly want to budget at least a couple of weeks. So we're talking about 2 to 2.5, maybe 3 months before that timeline. Does listing sometime in March or April, is that ideal for you? Does that sound like a reasonable timeline?
Well, I got a lot to do. I got a lot of packing to do, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done to the house. I got a floor that I didn't finish and some painting to do, and definitely want to get that squared away first.
Absolutely. So you're going to repeat and affirm at that point, right? So it sounds like, Dan, there's a lot of work to be done. So getting some advice and guidance on exactly what to prioritize prior to getting to market, that sounds like that might be an important part of the process for you. Is that correct?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
All the more reason that I'm excited that I'm going to be able to come out and be able to provide that information for you. So is it an option? And then you're going to dive in. So we've started on motivation, guys. And again, we talked about why that motivation is critical, and especially in this difficult market. Right now, in this market, this iteration of the market, it's going to be super, super important. Interest rates are higher than what these sellers have on their current mortgage, almost guaranteed. It's going to be more expensive for them to buy the same house, same price anywhere else. Not only is your commission and the fees and costs of moving, but they're going to be trading in a 3% interest rate for a 6% interest rate, which means that the people that are going to be listing their home have to be super motivated, have to really understand why they want to move. And for you, you have to really determine, because if you look at yourself like a guide, and you are a guide, if you're a good real estate agent, you're a guide to help people get from where they are to where they're going. And in order to guide people, you have to have a very, very, very clear understanding of what their objectives and goals and motivations are. And part of that is asking questions so that they can recognize the answers themselves. There's a coach that we have my kids talk to, and I think I get more advice, more value out of it than my kids do. But there's one of the things that she says all the time is those who do the work do the learning. And part of that is true for us too. We pose questions a lot of the time to make the seller understand their own motivations and become crystal clear on it. Oh, I want to make a move down south. Well, that's great. But that's sometimes people are really like, they really understand and they really like know exactly what their motivations are. A lot of the times, guys, they haven't thought this thing through. It's like, yeah, I want to move, but timeline, who cares? And I don't really, if we move, great. If we don't, great. And you can parse that out right on the phone. So ask them further questions. You know, Dan, is it an option for you not to move?
Yeah, right now, sure. I mean, I know it's going to happen some year, but it doesn't have to be this year.
Yeah. So I guess from my perspective, as you rate your motivation to move, and maybe one is hey, listen, if it happens, it's great, but if it doesn't, that's okay too. To 10, which is absolutely, I have to move. It is going to happen. How would you rate your motivation?
6.5, 7.
99% of the time, guys, that's going to be somewhere between 6 and 8. People never give 10 because they don't want to seem desperate. They never seem like they don't want to seem like a 1. And if they give you a 1 to 5, you should really consider whether or not that's something that you want to invest your time into. Well, if the perfect scenario were there, if I could sell my $600,000 home for $1 million and I could buy $1 million home for 500,000, then I would move. Can you make that happen? Respectfully, I'm really good at my job. No, I can't. I wish you the best of luck. Goodbye. Right. But you have to allow them to go through that process. A scale of 1 to 10, 1 being, not really interested, 10 being really interested. How would you rate your motivation? Then they have to answer that question themselves. I bet you they haven't even answered. They haven't even determined that. What's my motivation? It's important, guys. So how would you rate your motivation to move on a scale of 1 to 10? It's an important question. What would happen if the property didn't sell? That'd be okay. We can just keep living here for a couple of years, or how about renting it? Is it an option for you guys to make this move and just rent the house? Why do agents have a concern about asking that question? Can anybody guess?
Don't want to lose a sale.
You
Bingo.
don't want to give them any ideas.
Yep. It's in the back of all of our heads. But guess what? If we are a guide to help people accomplish their goals, and their goals can be accomplished by renting it versus selling it, then I guess my question is, do you really want to do your job, or do you want to just get a sale? Because if renting is honestly, if renting is a better scenario for somebody, but you never present it, and then they end up going through with the sale and it's not the best option for them. Like if you run it out and actually think about it, think it all the way through, and you're able to convince them to sell, but it's not the best option for them. Like, I don't know. I think everybody on this call, knowing most of you would be like, oh, all right, well, if that's the case, yeah, I wouldn't want them to do what's not the best option for them. And I promise you guys, 99.9% of the people, like, renting is not an option for them. It's not something that they want to do. Perhaps it more is right now. But if that's an option, help them with the rental. And then when they realize that tenants stink and being a landlord sucks, then they're going to call you and they're going to list their house with you.
And
then you've done your job.
And in the meantime, they're going to refer you to more people.
Bingo. Because you've illustrated trust and confidence. You know what? I was thinking about selling my home, but I talked to James Taylor the other day. He actually gave me the idea of renting my home. And it turns out that's a way better option for me right now. Think about somebody having a conversation with their friend or family member that's like that. It'll get easier over time to have just general conversations, guys, with people. But like, I'm inquisitive in general. I like to ask a lot of questions. So we're moving down south. Whereabouts down south? South Carolina. What about South Carolina attracted you? Did you guys spend a lot of time down there? Or, is it just, oh, we have some friends who actually lived in Mansfield. They moved down there. They're on this golf course community. It's amazing. Ah, you're big into golf. Do you golf up here much or do you down there? Right? There's a lot of hardcore salespeople that'll just get down to business. But listen, I'm genuinely, if you're interested, ask lots of questions. Why wouldn't you? Creates a little bit of a connection and a trust. It makes them feel important. Right? It's not about me. Like, I'm genuinely interested. What are you looking to accomplish? What's important to you about this? Then when they're having a difficult time understanding why you want to list the property at X, which is $50,000 less than they wanted to, you can go back to it. And you can have that conversation. Madison, listen, I understand what your motivations. I really want to help you accomplish your goal of getting down to the Cape so that you can be closer to family. I know your daughter is pregnant and giving birth in a couple of months. What we really want to do is make sure that you can get down there by the time the baby is born. And what you've shared with me, which I really appreciate, is that the baby's born in June. So in order for you to get down and get settled, you'll want to be there in May. Is that correct? So I'm not suggesting what you should or shouldn't do, but what I'm telling you is that if we need to get your home under contract by May, if we list it higher right now and we waste a month, even if we get it under contract in a month, that's still not going to get you to blank by blank. Do you see how the motivation and the understanding of why they're making the move is so critical? And it's not to get them to do something that you want them to do. It's to remind them why they want to do it and what they would need to do in order to get and accomplish what they want. If you don't have that, how are you going to bring it back to motivation when you're trying to convince them what they should be doing in order to accomplish their goals? It's going to be really, really hard. So have these conversations, understand. And then again, if you go back to the guiding principle of what we started with today, you're determining motivation not to waste your time or theirs. You're illustrating yourself as the professional and you're getting all of the information. All of those things are accomplished by asking lots of questions. So I'm going to take a pause here just on motivation. And I have one more thing to talk about with regards to timeline, but questions on motivation, or are there questions for me about the motivation section, or are there any other questions that you guys are asking that you think might help the group here, when they're doing pre-qualification?
I think you covered it all.
Ben, I think you nailed it. And what comes to mind repeatedly is the motivation takes it away from feeling like a sale when they get tied down or delayed or something like that, because now you're bringing it back to why are we here? Why are we moving forward? You're not thinking about Ben, oh, I got to get this closed, or we got to get it on the market. And it doesn't feel like that to them. It feels like, okay, what am I doing for you?
Yep. And I think listen, because I've been at points and parts in my career where, I really needed to sell real estate in order to pay bills. I needed to get another sale. And it's really hard because you're trying to illustrate confidence, but there is a sense of desperation. Like, I gotta make money. I gotta pay bills, right? Like you see the shit coming. Like, I got a month of savings left and I need money to pay my bills in 2 months. And so sometimes there is just a natural desperation that you have. But when you go through these list of questions, not only does it let the seller, when you're in that mindset, not only does it let the seller understand what their motivations and timeline are and why they're doing what they're doing, but it also inherently, it will allow you to better use your judgment for them. Like it's easier, I guess my point is it's easier if you're in desperation mode just trying to make a sale. It's easier for you to ignore what's in the client's best interest if you don't know what's the client's best interest. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's awesome.
So if you don't ask these questions, then you're not even allowing the like authentic good portion of who you are, make a decision. It's almost like, well, it's so removed. Like it's just a sale, just a sale. So just consider that again, too. You are a guide that are helping people accomplish what they want to get from here to there.
Yeah, it's good.
So the only other thing about timeline is that you want to make sure that the sellers ultimately understand how soon do you want to make this move happen? And they said, well, I'd like to sell in April. Okay, so we jot down April timeline. Well, just so I'm aware, are you looking to list your home in April, or is that when you'd ultimately like to pack up your stuff and get out of the house? Because sometimes people don't understand that question. When do you want to make the move? Well, I'd like to move, which means actually pack up my stuff in this timeline. We just want to make sure. So when you're asking that timeline question, ideally in terms of what works best for you, because that's what's most important. How soon would you like to make a move? Well, we'd like to move sometime in May. Now, just for clarification, I'd like to make sure, are you looking to make the move in May, or is that when you'd like to put your property on the market? Well, we'd like to, actually physically move by May. Okay, great. So if we were to list, going back and allowing us a little bit of time, let's say we listed the property in February here, and we were able to get it under contract within a few weeks, and you had to move prior to that May timeline, would that present a problem for you, or would that be okay? Well, that would be fine. We have our other house already, or it might not. Well, we're waiting for our kids to get out of school and we really want to be there until after June, whatever it is, so that they can finish out the school year in the house. And then, all right, great. So if you're looking to stay until after school, do you want a certain number of weeks before you actually make the move in order to get done with school and perhaps any graduations or anything like that? Well, yeah, that'd be awesome. So if we could have like 3 or 4 weeks after that. Okay, well, based on that timeline, it actually looks like listing in this timeline makes sense. Now, the only risk there is if we tighten up all the timelines and we list in May to move in the middle of June, if it doesn't sell right away, are you prepared for that, or does that present a problem for you? Right? Narrow down, because again, not only are you getting the information so you know how to advise them, but you're actually making them run through the scenario and determine for themselves exactly what they want. Because sometimes, and most times, they don't actually know. Motivation timeline, right? So going back to the beginning, we're going to set expectations. We're going to illustrate our professionalism. We're going to determine who the decision makers are. Then we're going to determine motivation and timeline. So what other information on the pre-qual do you think we need to go over, guys? Nothing. Motivation, timeline. That's it. Let's go. Coming out to the house. So I think that the next thing that I naturally go into is determining the buy-sell process. So we want to find out a little bit more information. We found out where they're going to go and what their timeline looks like. Now we have to sort of drill down and get a better sense of like what do they have as far as flexibility. So Lorraine, do you I know understand just from our limited conversation here that you're looking to sell your home here in Mansfield. You're looking to get down on the Cape and purchase sort of a retirement home, and you're looking to be in the Barnstable area. Now, do you need to sell your home and take the equity from the home in order to purchase your next? Or do you have the financial flexibility to purchase without selling this home?
I need the equity.
What'd you say?
I need the equity.
Yeah. And most folks do. So, then you go into some questions about, sort of what makes sense. You can even ask them, Lorraine, when you think about this whole process, do you envision, trying to find your next home before you sell this one? Or would you like to secure a buyer on this sale versus, and then go out and sell and find the next one? And they'll, a lot of the times they don't really know. They don't know what the options are. Well, I mean, we really need to take the equity from our current home, but I know the market down there is really tight. And then, determine if they're moving to an area like South Carolina where there's a 2,000, lot neighborhood and there's 70 homes on the market, securing the buyer first is really, really important. And Lauren and I did a podcast. I don't even know if it's out yet. We're going to put it up on YouTube and I'll share it with everybody in the group, but we went over this specific question because there's a lot of questions and then a lot of different ways. And I don't want to get into too many of them, but buying first versus, selling first versus contingent on suitable housing versus contingent on the sale of my home versus bridge loan financing and all of the different X's and O's of how to help people that need to sell to buy, how they can do that most effectively. And then based on their motivation, what is most effective for them? Because if you need to sell to buy, you've got to give up leverage somewhere. Do you have temporary housing? Is there people that you can stay with so that you can sell your home, get all the equity? And then when you buy, you don't have to make it subject to the sale of your home, which loses leverage in the negotiation. And then if you've determined that money is most important to them, then inconvenience can be appropriate. If convenience is most important, then you can use money to solve people's problems to give them more convenience. Because in no uncertain terms, if you need to sell in order to buy, you got to give up something. You're either going to give up leverage on the sale of your home, the leverage on the buy of your home, or you're going to have the inconvenience of yourself going into temporary housing or doing something like that. Or risk, which I go through because I've had people take lots of risk. I am risk tolerant. I would make an offer on a house and put down a $50,000 non-refundable deposit. Hey, I need to sell my home, but here's 50 grand, hold it. If I don't sell my home, you can just have it. Now the seller says, all right, shit. If he doesn't sell his house, we collect 50 grand. We'll sell the house again. We'll make 50 more grand. Great. So there's a lot of different ways that you can go with that. I'm not going to go into all of those, but that's a really important part of the pre-qualification process, because then when you show up to the house, once you understand what their flexibility is, you can craft the plan and the timeline to what their options are and what their motivation is allowing them to do. If not, if you don't want to get those questions answered, then you show up and you're like, well, this is, what we could sell your home for. And they go, all right, well, we got to figure out whether we're going to sell first or buy first. So we'll be in touch. And then Ben Esposito comes through and I'm like, here's the fucking plan. Boom, 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 boom. This is how we can accomplish your goals. Are you comfortable and confident that I can help you accomplish yours and get your home sold? Yeah, sure can. All right. Sign right here. Press hard. But if you can't answer their questions, if you can't give them the timeline, then they're not going to have the confidence to make a decision. And that's what it goes back to. You see me go back to that all the time. Relay confidence. If you have confidence and you've got all of the information and you've determined motivation and timeline, that's when you can really show them that you have the confidence in what you're talking about. And that confidence is relayed to them so that they can make a decision. People who don't have confidence have a hard time making a decision. Well, I got to think about it. Because I have unanswered questions in my head. That's why people think about it. When people have all the answers to their questions, they make decisions. So one of the next questions that I think is funny. So I'm going to change my view so I can see all of you that are actually on camera. How many of you guys actually asked the question, how much do you want to list your home for? Be honest. There it is. There it is. 3. I bet you everybody, I bet you with most agents, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of like 10 to 20% will ask a seller prior to coming out to the house how much they want to list the home for. What do most agents believe sellers are going to say to them? Somebody give it to me.
Hi.
Hey. So wait, did somebody give me an answer?
I said they're going to tell you a high price, higher than it's worth.
So that's part of it. Most of the time in my experience, the sellers will say, if they don't answer the question, they'll say, well, that's what I'm having you out for. Right? Anybody ever get that? Well, that's so they don't want to tell you because they don't want, hey, I don't want to give him any clues because then he's just going to tell me what I want to hear. And that's the fear that we have too. But it's important to understand, and here's why. It's important to understand where their mindset is, because with all of the information, you can deliver the message and be prepared to overcome the objection that they have in their own mind. So if they tell you something that's like 800,000 and you look at the comps and it's 725,000 and you're going to go and present 725,000, you're going to have to be very, very clear on why you believe that the home is priced significantly below what they believe it is. And it might allow you the time to gain the confidence to really go at it and or practice the options that the sellers have. You know, Jess, I understand from our pre-qualification that you believe the home is worth right around 800,000. And I know I dropped off the pre-qualification and perhaps, you know, the suggested list number was significantly below. What I'd like to do is really go through, because my objective here is to give you my honest truth about what I believe the home is worth so that you can make an educated decision based on my experience in the business. My goal is to get you top dollar for the home, but I also understand that you're looking to get down to X by X. And this is really important for you to make this move happen in the timeline that you're looking for. And because I respect you and that process and your motivation, I want to be very honest with you. Do I have your permission to be honest? Yes, of course. Without that, you roll in, you're like 725. Look at what I'm going to tell her. I'm going to tell her 725. She's going to be so happy. She bought this for like 200 grand, like 4 years ago. And you walk in all confident. You're like, yeah, 725. You're welcome. And then they're in the back of their head. They're like, all right, well, I thought it was worth 800,000. I'm not going to tell him. He seems real confident about this price. On to the next. And then somebody else comes in, tells them what they want to hear. Lorraine, I appreciate the question. So Lorraine asked, what do you say if they give you a number? If they don't give you a number, do you explain the reason why you're asking for the price they have in mind? Absolutely. Listen, there's going to be some sellers that are just, they're a wall. They have this belief. So here's what I know. 50 to 60% of sellers will tell me a price. They're almost caught off guard by it a little bit. And they'll just tell me, yeah, well, I think it's worth like 725,000. Great. Move on. You've got an idea. You can ask them follow-up questions, but I typically don't. If they talk about a crazy number, I'll ask them a little bit of why. So it sounds like you've done a little bit of research. Sounds like you know what you're doing. You've probably looked online and done some research. Specifically, was there a reason that you thought the home was worth 725,000? Well, my neighbor's home sold for blank. And then you go online and you see that, you know, their home is way more upgraded, has a pool and it's a way better backyard. And you're like, well, obviously but they just see the same colonial and they're like, all right, well, They got 7.25. I want 7.25. It's
Mhm.
natural. But then you can be prepared for it, guys. Then you can have that conversation with them and let them, again, deliver the information so that they can hear it, so that they can make an educated decision. If you're not doing that, then it's not worth it. Right. Benny says, because Zillow said so. And guess what? I'm going to use Zillow too. Right. So Lorraine asked, what do you do if they don't say it? Well, I want you to tell me what it's worth. So there's a couple of different ways that you can go about this. Some folks will lean on, hey, listen, Lorraine, I can certainly respect that. And what I want you to understand is that most people, when they mention that to me, it's basically because they don't want the number that they have in their head to influence the pricing strategy that I recommend. Is that sort of why you're hesitant to give me that? And they'll go, well, yeah, I want you to come up with the number. It's like, all right. So just understand, Lorraine, that the reason that I'm asking for this is I want to understand sort of where you are at mentally with the price of your home, and just make sure that we're sort of in the same ballpark or realm, because ultimately, if I don't think I can accomplish your goals, I want to be very upfront and honest with you and not waste any of your time. Would you prefer that I'm honest with you about the value of your home, or do you want me to tell you what you want to hear? Well, I want you to be honest with me. All right, great. So just in sense of like a ballpark, ideally, like what would be a great number for you to get out of the home? Now you can go in that direction, or you can use something, again, you can say, and I always look up Zillow before I go out to before I pre-qualify or while I'm pre-qualifying. So let's say Zillow says 725 and they don't want to give me a number. I'll just say, well, it sounds like, again, my intention is to give you an honest opinion of what I believe the home is worth. Now I was looking earlier and Zillow looks like it indicates a value around 725,000. Do you believe that Zillow estimate is accurate, or do you believe it's a little bit high, a little bit low? Now you're not asking them a specific number, but you're just getting a sense of where they believe, well, that number's definitely low. They very rarely will tell you that it's high. But it starts to have a little bit more of a conversation. You can start to get a little bit more of of context about why they believe and what they believe. Guys, and that's important too. Lorraine, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
So we're gonna be able to go through again when we're done here. I'll email you guys over just a sample script that I use and some of the objection handlers, like exactly what to say in those circumstances, and then we can kind of go from there. So how much do you want to sell for? It's important. And then we're gonna go into like details about the home, right? And I'm jumping a little bit all over the place with this just because I've got each individual topic and I want to give you guys a sense of like why we're doing each section. So the question about a home. So while you're on the phone with them or prior to the pre-qualification, you want to bring up all the information. You want to verify how many times does the assessor's office have it as a 3 or 4 bedroom and it's the opposite. So I just wanted to verify with you a little bit of information. So in your own words, Adele, please describe your home in as much detail as you feel comfortable. And then what they'll do is they will give you exactly what they love about the home and what they think is important. Right. So some people will focus on, oh my God, it's in the most wonderful neighborhood and we have the most wonderful outdoor yard and the woods is great. It backs up right to the trail. Some people will say, here are the upgrades. I really love my kitchen. Some people will say the size is amazing. Some people will say this, that, or the other thing. But ultimately you start to determine like what value they see in the home. Now that has 2 benefits. Number one is that you can always go back to those things to make them understand that you're listening. So when you're when you're showing them comps and you're going through the value, you can say, I know that, one of the most amazing things about your home is this wonderful neighborhood that you have. Now, when we're making adjustments, this house was not in the same neighborhood, and I'm going to make an adjustment of about $50,000 because you're right. Your neighborhood is amazing. You can illustrate that you're listening, but also if they're buying with you as well, you can start to determine on the buy side what is important to them on the buy side. It just gives you a better understanding of what they're looking to accomplish on the buy side too. And then you go through a list of questions. We have a listing intake form that goes over all of the particulars. So I spend a fair amount of time asking them questions about the home. Have you had any major recent updates over the past 10 years with major mechanical items, roof, siding, windows, heating system, central air? Well, we did our windows here and I did this there and this there and this there. All right. And any significant upgrades or improvements to the kitchens or bathrooms, anything sort of really important there. And they'll tell you what they feel is important and you can get more clarification on it. And then you can ask them a question like, is there anything that if you were looking to purchase this home, is there anything you feel like you'd want to do right away when you bought it? Well, we've been thinking about, renovating our blank because it's old or our floors are scuffed up or whatever it might be. And ultimately, to determine an accurate price, you need this information, but this prevents you from having to go out to the property multiple times. Is there anybody on the call that will admit that they think that going out to the property prior to determining a price is necessary? Nobody?
To get
I know everybody.
accurate price. To get an accurate price, yes, I think so. But you can also ask enough questions that you can get the information.
Yeah, I appreciate that, James. And I think that everybody inherently feels a little bit similar, right? Like, hey, listen, I got to be able to see it to know what price. But you don't need to see it in order to come into a range of pricing. And if you've really done your research when you're out there, if you've made a mistake or the condition is worse or better than sort of described, you can make adjustments on the fly. But you can do that once you walk through the property. But most people, they go, well, I got to see the house because most sellers believe that you need to see the house to put a value on it. I'm sorry. If you have a raised ranch in Mansfield, I know what the price is. I know within 25 grand without seeing it, I know what the price is. And if I ask you all these questions, I'm generally not wrong on my pricing, even if I go out, as long as you're honest about the questions.
Well, I think that's the hard part is when you ask them, questions and they think their house is worth more than it is. They don't tell you about their scuffed floors. They don't tell you about the kitchen that hasn't been updated since the 70s,
But that's why you dive into these questions, right? So any significant upgrades or improvements about to the kitchens and bathrooms, and they go, no, but they're in great shape. All right. So do you have oak cabinets or are they maple? Are they, and what sort of countertops? Are your appliances older? What flooring do you have in the kitchen? Is it linoleum? Is it tile? Right? Dial down. Now, ultimately, honestly, everything will shake out. Like that, some things will be better than you expect. Other things won't be as good as you expect. And that's okay. They all sort of even themselves out. But you're going to bring and deliver the information. Otherwise, again, you've got to go out to the property prior to. And then you've got to go out twice. And that might not be listen, I've done that twice this spring or this winter. One was a $1.7 million house in Norton that was worth 1.3 once I saw it. And the other one was a $2.3 million house in Norfolk that was super unique. I thought it was worth 2. So I didn't get any of them. But those houses I'm not going to sit on the market for a long time. So I told them what I honestly believed, and neither of the sellers felt comfortable with that. And so they went with agents who they felt comfortable with, which means that I have done my job. I've showed up honestly and purposefully and told them the truth. And I am unattached to the outcome because I'm doing my job regardless. but dive in. So the pre-qualification, like the listing intake form that we have is fairly comprehensive. So let's see. So it looks sort of like this. So the bottom of it, it has, water, sewer, age of major mechanicals, windows, central air, electrical, other features, bedrooms, bathrooms, all of the stuff. So this listing intake form that we have is just a way to kind of collect all of the information in one central location. I can share that with you guys too, if that'll be helpful. So we go through details and conditions. And then we want to understand what our level of competition is. And we want to understand where the seller is at with regards to their decision-making process on who they choose to help them with this process. So are any of you guys asking the seller during the pre-qualification, or is anybody here asking them if they're planning to interview other agents for the job of helping them sell the home? Yeah. Well, Ashley is, because I told her she has to.
Yes.
I think it's absolutely 100% important to do that. I failed to do that on one about 2 weeks ago because they were friends. And I honestly thought they had pre-decided. And as I was leaving, another realtor pulled in the driveway.
Yeah, doesn't that suck?
And I literally said, I just made a mistake because I didn't present to that.
Yep. And sometimes we're nervous. Why are we nervous to ask that question?
We don't want to know the answer.
Well, that's part of it. But we also don't want to, just like the question earlier, we don't want, like, about renting the property, we don't want to give the idea that they should. Right? So if I ask that question, are you planning to interview more than one agent for the job of selling your home? All of us sit there and go, well, if they were only going to interview me and I just gave them the idea, now they feel like they should.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, I promise, guys, that one question won't motivate. If somebody is comfortable enough having just you come out to the house and that's their only plan at this point, and you ask them if they're going to interview other agents, it's not like all of a sudden they're going to be like, light bulb moment, I'm going to go out and interview 6. But we're scared of competition. And the reason that we're scared of competition is because we don't have confidence in what we're doing. And we don't have confidence in what we're doing because we haven't spent the time to determine what the pre-qualification looks like, act like a professional, present in a good way, learn a listing presentation, really do some research and evidence on why the property should be listed at a particular price. And if we don't have that confidence, it's going to be hard to relay that to the seller. And therefore we're scared. I ain't scared. You know what I tell sellers? You planning to interview more than one agent for the job of selling your home? They say yes. I say great. I said I always love when sellers interview multiple agents. Can I tell you why? And they're like, yeah, why? Because I'm going to be able to do one of two things for you. Either I'm going to blow your socks off and you're going to feel comfortable and confident. You're going to be like excited to work with me. And being that you've had an opportunity to meet with somebody else, you're going to have the perspective to understand the value that I provide. Or worst case scenario for me, but best case scenario for you is that you determine that the other agent is the better fit for you. And to be honest with you, that also means that I have done my job. Because I have given you the perspective that allows you to make that decision comfortably and confidently. And ultimately, I want what's in your best interest. What's the seller say then? Then the seller sits there and says to themselves, this guy wants me to interview other agents because he's that confident that he knows what he's doing and he wants what's in my best interest. It's not about me, the real estate agent. It's about you as the seller. And if you as the seller determine that somebody else is better suited to help you with this process. Either I haven't done my job correctly or that person just is a better fit. There have been sellers that have worked with other agents and that agent was the right fit for them. The way that I do business perhaps didn't mesh well with them. They wanted somebody that was going to be there for them all the time and like coddle them to sleep at night. And that ain't me. And if that is what you want, I am not the best fit for you. And I'm okay with that. So those of you who ask, do you ask who the competition is? Don, do you ask that? Like if they say they're going to interview other agents, do you ask them who?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, you
And
do.
sometimes I might say, wow, they're a great agent.
Do you really? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if I know them locally too, I'll say the same thing. But
I'll never put down another agent though.
what's the most common response that you get when you ask that question? If they don't want to tell you, or that they just don't want to tell you?
Sometimes I think they say, oh, I'm not sure if I should tell you that, or and I'm like, that's fine. Just curious. Yeah.
So here's the benefit, right? So the benefit of asking who is that you know what you're up against. So if you're an agent that sells real estate in a particular community and you know the other agents that are competing against you, then you know what you're up against. And you can highlight some of the biggest differences between the two of you. The other thing that you can do is, and this depends on your market share and or your team's market share, but you can also ask the seller if they would like it. So, hey, Dan, the reason that I ask, so are you interviewing more agents for the job of selling your home? Yes, we're going to interview 2 other agents. Great. Would it be valuable for you, Dan, if I was able to show up with a real estate report card so that you could compare apples to apples, exactly what the track history of each agent that you're interviewing is side by side, and this information comes directly from MLS, so it can't be edited or misused. But would it be helpful just to see sort of on average how many homes and how long it takes each agent to get results? Well,
Yes.
yeah, I think that would be a good idea. Great. It's the first and last name of each of the agents that you're planning to interview. Well, it's so and so and so and so. Great. A couple of great options for you there. Everybody has a little bit of a different way of approaching real estate, but I'm excited to share with you what I can do, and I'll provide all of that information so you can do an apples to apples comparison. Now, if you sell 2 homes a year right now because you're newer in the business, I would not go with that strategy. I'd still try to find out who your competition is, because even as a newer agent, if newer agents are competing against me, they can play, I'm not saying it'll work, but they can play the whole like, well, you're not going to deal with Ben all the time. He has all these agents and staff that work for him, and he's, you're going to deal with his team more than you're going to deal with him. You can play that card because that is true. You as an individual agent, if you're selling in my market and competing against me, you will have more interaction with your client, with that particular client, than I will. That is very, very true. Now I'm going to know that I'm competing against you, and I'm going to set up why it's not beneficial and why my team is better to help and serve. But that's the game. You're competing. You are in competition and you're in sales. So you have to illustrate and highlight the benefits of working with you, and you have to know what your competition is doing so that you can combat that with why hiring you is a better option for the sellers. And you have to have that belief too. I was at a real estate conference once, it was a while ago. Shout out to Gil Campos back in the day. But the speaker up on stage, just like getting everybody riled up, and he says, so think about it. Who's the best real estate agent in your area? And I went, Gil Campos, because he was the #1 agent in my office. Great guy too, by the way. But I said, Gil Campos. And the guy says, if you didn't say yourself, that's the first problem. And I was like, shit. If you don't have a confidence in yourself that you're the best agent, you might not have the most experience. You might not have a team. You might not, that's okay. You can still be the best agent if you put every single thing you have to offer into this. You are the best agent for that seller. But you have to believe it first. Otherwise, the seller's never going to believe it either. But understanding who your competition is important. Why are they interviewing other agents? It's a hard question to say the first couple of times, but as soon as you go out on an appointment and you're prepared for it and you provide a real estate report card and then the seller chooses you, you're going to start to really understand the value of that question. Going back to, I just forgot this little part. It'll be on the script, but, finding out when they talk about their home, finding out whether they plan to make any modifications or adjustments to the property, if they're open to staging. I've had this thing where we provide free staging consultation. We bring in a staging a consultant to the house before we list any property. And I've had a couple of clients that have actually gone in a different direction because they just have zero desire to do it. And I come in and I'm like, we're going to get our staging team in here and we're going to, help you design the property to capitalize on the value of the home and get you every penny out. And they're like, I don't want any of that. I want you to take pictures. I want you to get it on MLS. And I come in and I tell them that this is all really and best for you and all that kind of stuff. It's because I didn't ultimately determine what was motivation. They'll tell you if you ask the questions. Timeline is the most important motivation. Not doing anything to the home or not having to put any more money in or not having to clean up the house. Those might be the most important things to them, and money might be secondary. And if you understand that and you know that, that's important. So we've gone through all of these questions. There's two things left that we want to do at this point. The first thing is we want to very clearly identify what the next steps are going to be and set expectations for them. So, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I so appreciate you answering all of these questions. And it's going to really allow me to dive in and figure out exactly what your home is worth and what it will take to sell. That way, when we sit down, I can provide all of that information for you. Now, I've asked you a lot of questions. What questions do you have for me? What do you think the number one question that comes up is? When you ask them, what questions do you have for me?
What's your commission?
Yeah, bingo. So there it goes back to people are hesitant to ask the question because they don't want to have that conversation over the phone. Well, how much is your commission? Well, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I'm jotting down that. So commission, and I'm assuming by asking that question, Dan, ideally one of your main goals is to net as much money out of the house as possible. Is that right?
Correct.
Perfect. So I'm going to make a note of that. Understand that my commission is negotiable. And when I sit down with you, we're going to look at all of the factors with regards to how much you're going to net, both what you list the home for, what we can expect to get out, and then all of the expenses. And we'll detail those so that, when we ultimately decide that working together makes sense, you'll have a full understanding about that. So I'll make a note right here. Are there any other questions that you have for me right now?
Nope, not at this time.
Nope. It's always commission. Sometimes they'll ask if you're prospecting out of the area, if you're doing probates or expires or something like that and you're way out of the area, they'll ask you where's your office, or do you sell real estate in this town, or stuff like that. And we have objection handlers for that. But again, what you're looking to determine is ultimately what questions you can be prepared for, because would you rather get to the house and have to answer those questions, or would you rather determine what the questions are and then have the opportunity to study up and make sure you have a full understanding of what those answers are before you present. I don't know about you, but I'd rather know the answers a day or the questions that I'm going to be asked a day before I have to answer them. It's almost like not fair. Because you know that other agent's not asking that. Okay, I'll see you on Friday at 4. I missed this earlier, but one of the other things is what is important to you. What are you looking for in the agent that you choose to help you with the sale of your home? Because sometimes they'll tell you, we're looking for somebody that's going to be good at communication. We're looking for somebody with a really good knowledge of the local market. We're looking for somebody that sold a lot of homes in our neighborhood. We're looking for this, that, or the other thing. Great. I'm going to make a note of those that sound like really reasonable expectations based of the real estate agent that you choose. Now you know what they're looking for, what their questions are, how much they want to list their home for, what the features and benefits are, what their timeline is, what their motivation is. You know everything. Now, the last thing that you do, once you understand and you have all of the information, is you want to get the seller to the point that they understand that making a decision when you come out is okay. Because most people have a hard time making decisions. And they often what it is that they haven't given themselves permission to make a decision. They know what's in their best interest. They just they haven't given themselves permission. So what you want to do is you want to future pace that conversation. Right? So I would say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, again, I so appreciate the time and the opportunity to come out and share the information in order to help you guys make this move down to Colorado, down to whatever. Now, when I come out on Friday, I'm going to be prepared to talk to you about price and also what we can do to help you with the home. Now, assuming that you are comfortable and confident that I can help you sell this home, are you open to hiring me when I come out on Thursday at 5:00? Not will you, are you open? So again, Dan, I really appreciate the time over the phone today. I'm excited about seeing your wonderful home, especially the backyard. That pool sounds amazing. Looking forward to seeing it on Thursday. Just so you're aware, I'm going to be prepared to talk to you about price and also just illustrate exactly what I can help you do to get top dollar and make this process as easy as possible. Now, assuming that you feel comfortable and confident that I'm the right agent, and only if you feel comfortable and confident that I can get the job done, are you open to hiring me to help you with the sale of your home when I come out on Thursday at 2:00?
Well, Ben, I'm the type of person that I'm a firm believer in sleeping on my decisions. So I most likely wouldn't have an answer for you that night.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. And you know what, Dan, sometimes I'm like that too. And, so yeah, I would never want you to do anything that you're uncomfortable with. And just so you're aware, I will have the paperwork ready, because if you are confident and you have just overwhelming confidence that this is the right decision, I want you to know that I'm ready to go to work for you right away. Does that sound fair?
Sure.
I'm not saying that I won't come out. I'm not upset if they need time to sleep on it. But I'm also giving them permission now to think about whether or not they'd be comfortable. So now going into the meeting, because what do most people do if they're like Dan and they're going to sleep on it? And then at the end of my presentation, I'm going to ask them if they're comfortable and confident. And if so, I'm going to ask them to sign the contract. And if that's the first time that they've actually thought, oh, I might have to make a decision in this meeting, they're going to go, whoa. No, I want to sleep on it. But now, Dan, between the time that I ask him that question and explain that I'll be ready to go to work for him and the appointment, however, So now, whatever timeline that is, Dan now is going to spend that amount of time understanding that, hey, listen, if he blows my socks off, I guess he'll be ready. Maybe I will be too. Because it's a reflex thing that people do that they don't want to commit. But if you give them permission and you tell them that you're ready and you give them time to overcome that sort of reflex, know that they're going to always have a reflex, I need to think about it, then they may at that time, and they may not, but they may at that time just commit. And they're not going to get caught off guard if at the end of the presentation, you ask them to sign a contract and work with you. Questions on that? Oh, I forgot about one other thing. This is professionalism from start to finish. So I have and will continue, prior to meeting with my clients, I will email them a full market analysis with my recommended list price and all of the information about my team and I. I used to print it off and deliver it. And depending on where it is in the timeline, I may still do it. We get these beautiful folders delivered. Inside these folders, we have our listing presentation and our CMA. And in here is exactly how much we would recommend that they sell their home for. Can you guess why most agents don't put a recommended list price and deliver it to them prior to meeting? Anybody guess why agents don't want to do that?
Because they don't want to potentially get ghosted, and if they don't have the ability to come over any don't have the ability to address objection they may have because of that price that they see.
Yep. Yeah. So what Dan's basically saying is that they're concerned that the seller will cancel the appointment or be upset about the price that you give them. Anybody else feel like that? Or feel like sellers will do that? Here's my take on it. I believe that information is better learned prior to the appointment than when you get there. So if you tell them that the home is worth between 7 and 7.25, and they call you up and they say, Ben, I just saw your list price, 7.25, you got to be out of your mind. Now you can say, if that's a seller that didn't give you an estimate on their list price, you can say, well, it sounds like you perhaps I've missed something about the home. Do you feel like that price obviously is a little bit low? What was your expectation? Now you've given it to them so they can't say, well, I want to know your number. Well, we were hoping for closer to 800,000. Well, why don't we do this? Dan, I understand sort of where you want to stand, and I understand. What I'm going to do is prior to our appointment, I'm going to go over the comps again, and I'm going to take a second look at it. Now, ultimately, when I come out to the property, I'm going to, again, tell you what I honestly believe. I'll also have the opportunity to take a look at the home, and perhaps through the communication of exactly what your home has to offer, maybe I missed something, and I probably did. So either way, I'm excited to get out and take a look at the home, and I will be honest with you on what I think the home is worth. Does that sound fair? Yeah, it does. Now you know exactly what they want. Isn't that a benefit?
Mm-hmm.
Sure is. So you send them all the information. You do it professionally. Sandy's on this call. Sandy and I have ordered like 15 different types of folders because none of them felt right. It might be the biggest pain I'm pretty sure she wanted to like quit because of folders. But I had to get it right because it's a first impression type of thing. So we've taken an expensive amount of time to customize our listing presentation. You know, what value you get when you hire me. How do we want that information displayed? A little bit about me, a little bit about what we do, a little bit about the team, why staging is important, our market share. We're going to be doing, I think in March, we'll do something on listing presentation packets. So hopefully if you guys need some help on that, we can help you with that. So we set expectations. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, later today or tomorrow, whatever timeline you determine you need, I'm going to be sending over a packet of information. I'm going to have it dropped at the house by one of my team members. And I'm also going to email that over to you so you can digest it digitally if that's a better environment for you to do that. Now, what's included in the packet is information about me and exactly what our strategy looks like in order to sell homes. In addition, it's going to have a full market analysis with all the adjustments to illustrate very clearly and effectively why we believe your home is worth what we believe it's worth. Will you have an opportunity prior to our meeting tomorrow at 5 o'clock to review that? Well, sure. Yeah, we'll take a look at it. Great. Now, when you sit down, the seller has already digested information. You're not presenting stuff. They're going to tell you what their objections are. They're going to be back in it just makes it so much easier, guys. And ultimately, if you're way off and they don't like what you do to sell homes or your experience level or the price that you recommended and they canceled your appointment, then evaluate whether what you're giving them is accurate and an accurate representation and professional enough to justify what they just gave you as feedback, or you just realize that you saved time because you could have gone out on that appointment and wasted 2 or 3 hours and found out the same information, but now you've saved yourself that trip and you can use that time to go and find other clients and prospects to actually do business with. I'd rather know now than, bury my head in the sand and pretend that doesn't exist. So, questions on any part of the pre-qualification process, especially with sellers? Is there anything that anybody else includes or questions that they ask that I didn't cover here? Genuinely curious if there's good questions that you ask that I didn't cover.
Are there any other decision makers besides yourself?
Yep. And so
I think you went over that, right?
Yeah, we touched on that at the beginning, but yep.
Yeah.
And so that's where, so just understand too, guys, if I'm pre-qualifying somebody and then the husband or wife is at the appointment, part of my listing presentation is to review all of the information. So Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I'd like to take just a minute to make sure that you guys, we are all on the same page about your motivation and the timeline. Now, I know Mr. Seller, you and I chatted over the phone, so I'm going to direct these questions to Mrs. Seller. Mrs. Seller, would you mind if I just sort of asked you these questions to make sure that, everybody feels the same way? So your husband mentioned this timeline. Is that accurate? Is that sort of what your expectations were? Now, he mentioned a price of this. Do you feel like that's a accurate representation of what you guys feel, or do you feel like your home might be worth higher or lower? Direct the questions to them so that they can answer it. Then you get their personality style. You get some differences in the, in what their, motivations are, stuff like that. So yeah, good question. Any other questions?
As a newer agent, what do you recommend including in that folder when you send that you send to the sellers, like when you're talking about yourself?
Yeah, so I think, Lorraine, that determines on what you're offering. So I think, I know, as agents that sort of haven't listed a multitude of properties, I think that's part of what you need to determine your value is. I would lean on the value and the experience of the brokerage. Like if you don't have a whole lot of listings sold, you can lean on what EXP has done, in the local market, what their market share looks like. And then you have to determine your value. What are you doing for them? Are you doing a staging consultation? Are you doing professional photography? What is your experience? And that's going to be determined over time. And ultimately you and I have talked about this before, but if you don't have any experience selling a home, then I would advise that you partner with somebody who does. Because honestly, again, if you go back to being a guide and doing what's in the best interest of a seller, of a client, and you don't have any experience selling a home, is that the best thing for the seller? Honestly, ask yourself. It's probably not. I'm not saying you shouldn't just go after it, but like, honestly, like, is that the best thing for them? No. But is having your energy and enthusiasm, right? I'm a newer agent. Listen, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I want to admit something to you that I am newer in this business. I've only listed and sold 2 properties in my entire career. But because I understand that I want what's in your best interest, I've decided to partner with this real estate agent here at my company. They have over 20 years of experience, and they're going to be able to come in with the experience, and I'm going to come in with the energy and enthusiasm. So you get 2 agents for the price of 1. Isn't that great? Right? And then you go to a successful agent, because guess what? Even if you split the commission and you say, hey, listen, come up to Don. Don, listen, I know you sell a lot of real estate. Hey, would you go out on this listing appointment with me? I'll split the commission 50-50 with you. All you have to do is help and guide me, give me the experience and the advice. And what I'll do is I'll hustle around and do all the work. We can share some of the expenses, or I'll cover the expenses. We'll split it 50-50. Don, if somebody came up to you and did that, would you go out on the appointment with them and not only help them, but also make some money?
100%.
100%. But what do we do as agents? Oh, I'm a little afraid, or, oh, that commission is going to be $15,000 and I need the full $15,000. Well, guess what? If you're not the right fit, the seller's going to know it. If you don't have enough experience, the seller's going to know it. And you're not going to make $15,000. You're going to make nothing. And you're not going to gain the experience of working with a guy like Don, or a guy like Dan, or Jess, or, you know, any of these great agents that are on this call that have done it. Because if you split half the commission, you're going to be able to ask them questions. You're going to watch them present. You're going to see what their marketing materials look like. That knowledge, honestly, is worth as much as the commission is. And I know, Lorraine, you're asking that question, but we've had this conversation, and that's what you're doing right now. You're relying on good agents within our organization to help secure these listings for you so that you can gain the experience, make the money, and help your clients.
Mm-hmm.
So within that listing presentation, information about the company, information about you and the other agent, and or just you and what value you can provide, some of the things that you think are important. And if anybody wants, I can send over our listing presentation. You can just use it as a template. But if you're an individual agent, it's going to be a lot about sort of the value that we provide. And some of it is obviously a lot of it is not going to be applicable to you, but it can give you a foundation and a framework for it. Any other questions on that? So 1143, the buyer pre-qualification, I can send that out. It's along the same line. A lot of it has to do with motivation. What is more important, you know, understanding motivation from a buyer standpoint is critical. And it's also very important to give them clear expectations about what the market is like right now, so that they don't come in blind, right? We see all of these people that start and they make offers with agents who don't prep them, and they don't really know themselves that it's such a competitive market, and, you know, everybody's waiving home inspections. You want to go over each of the parts of the process, right? So you want to walk them through what it's like to go and buy a home and search and compete, so that you need to understand the motivation. You need to understand their financial flexibility. And you need to be really, really clear on timeline. Timeline is a major part of motivation. So it's very similar in that you're establishing yourself as a professional by asking questions. You're going through the timeline of telling them exactly how this whole process works. So without getting into a specific sort of question answer on buyer pre-qualification, does anybody have questions, specific questions on like pre-qualifying buyers, or have you experienced anything that that you'd like to share or ask questions about?
Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I think I talked to you about, said earlier about asking if all decision makers, because I usually do ask it all the time, and I neglected not to do it twice last week during 2 different listing appointments, and it came back to bite me both times. But, assuming, for instance, there was a piece of land that a gentleman owned, he passed away, and it basically went to a probate and went to a sister and a brother. And those are the 2 people I met with, the only people I've talked to. You could see they were on the probate paperwork, and I assumed they were the only decision makers. We'll come to find out during, a couple of weeks in, they weren't. They were talking to other family members about, actually an offer we brought in, but, so that's kind of like, you got to ask that question. The other time was a piece of commercial property. I met with, a couple of family members and didn't ask the question. And I got the feedback from them as well, is that, we're still talking to other family members, which I didn't realize is. So what happens is this is one of the problems is my presentation to this gentleman, I have to rely on him to present to his family members. It ain't going to come across like I presented it. So that's where the disconnect is. And they're asking questions he can't answer, and I'm not there. So that's kind of the breakdown with that. It's very important to make sure that, and even with buyers, is how many buyers you have that they do have a decision maker, right? But they're not on the paperwork, they're not on the pre-approval. They're kind of like just not there, but they have a say in it, right? So it's very, very important.
Yeah, it really is. It's an important part of the question. I appreciate you sharing too, with those instances, because again, like I think, people can look at, agents like you and I, Dan, and just, based on the number of houses that we sell and the experience in the business that, we sort of do things correctly all the time. And I listen, over the years, I try to be as diligent as possible, but this job is not easy in the sense that like, there's nothing complicated about it, but sometimes you can just get into a conversation and you're like, this seller seems like they're on the fence. I'm not going to push them too hard. And then you don't ask the questions, then you get stung by it. And so I think the whole idea is to, like, if you're not doing this on a daily basis, newer agents need to be practicing this. You need to be role playing, having the conversations. So call somebody else on this call, because everybody here is willing to work and listen and support one another. If you're part of our organization here at EXP, we have role play groups with agents up and down the East Coast. You can spend a different week with a different role play partner, and you can work on listing presentations. You can work on cold calling or prospecting, but practice. You can't present, like, pre-qualify 6 times a year and become an expert at it. But if you practice it every day for 2 years, you're going to be an expert at it. You're going to be able to relay that confidence. So the first thing that you have to do is go through and make sure that the list of questions and the cadence of them, that you have a full understanding, that you've got a plan before you go in. Then you've got to practice it so that you can get that confidence. It will result in far greater results for you than if you just winged it. So we're going to put together, again, based on the conversation and just some of the work that I've done over the past few days to prepare for this, we're going to put together a pre-qualification script for you guys and just a little bit of a summary about what we talked about. So we can send it out to everybody on the call. If anybody's watching this recording afterwards, just shoot us a DM or a message through any of these platforms, and we'll, with your email address, we'll be happy to send it out to you guys as well. Our goal and my goal individually is always to be able to pour out and help and serve. And, fortunately the platform that I'm associated with EXP right now allows me to do that, on a much bigger scale, and allows me to start building this so that, we can create a community of real estate agents that is just really supportive of one another. And, we can all help grow each other's businesses and just live better lives. So as always, I really appreciate everybody showing up fully and completely. Those of you that are in a position to participate, thank you for participating. It's always makes it a little bit easier for me if I have people to talk to. So thank you for that. And if you guys need anything, feel free to reach out. I'm always here to help. All right. So thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful rest of the day.